we start today's video, I want to give a quick shout out to Nolan B Artwork on Tumblr. He made me this really snazzy caricature of myself to use as a little avatar for myself in my videos, as I hope to get a little more footing on all this YouTube business. You can check out his stuff on this link, this URL right here, and absolutely check out his artwork and commission something from him, because he's great and talented. Thanks everyone, I hope you enjoy the video.
Because I'm just going to say it. I think it's super creepy you get sexually aroused by physical violence.
Well, but also emotional violence.
Wicked gods and evil queens, assassins and enforcers, gods and demons. Confronting every great hero is a great villain. This is a tribute to the most vile and villainous. This is Most Wanted. Full disclosure, growing up, I was a gigantic chicken shit. I really couldn't bring myself to watch scary movies or TV shows till I was in high school, and even then I rarely indulged. That being said, I didn't know how many fun and interesting movies I was being deprived of, and playing catch-up in that regard was pretty fun. I found a lot of new favorite horror movies, such as the recent It remake, Insidious, and the 2017 presidential inauguration. But we're not here to talk about those. We're here to talk about Pinhead.
Who you calling Pinhead?
I had to, alright? It was there. Fine. Fine! Let's keep this rolling. Pinhead's trademark pale face and pinned head have become impossible not to recognize. A sadomasochistic demon priest with a penchant for torment and Rubik's Cubes, Pinhead is among the most famous of the circle of deadly slasher icons. Which is a little funny, since Pinhead toes the line between supernatural horror and serial killer slasher. In regards to how and why that is, the story is actually a bit interesting, but first, we gotta go back! Holy shit, 9 movies, to the very first Hellraiser in 1987. Hellraiser is about Kirsty Cotton, a teenage girl who discovers that her once-thought dead Uncle Frank sold his soul to demonic powers that be, and is using those to come back to life and force Kirsty's stepmom to make blood sacrifices to help return him to the living. Also, the, Cenobites are in there somewhere. While he was a driving force, Pinhead simply wasn't the villain of the first film. A bad dude, yes, but Frank and Julia are the real antagonists. The BDSM demon Pinhead acted as the leader of the Cenobites, entities that live to torture. If you don't cross them, they really won't bother you, but they'll gladly take you as a torture dolly if you give them reason to. Kirsty even manages to strike a deal with Pinhead, who intends to torture the former before she proposes she can get him Frank to torture instead. This quickly establishes Pinhead as a reasonable character. His hunger for torture isn't beyond negotiation, and you can fairly easily appeal to his pragmatism. That's not to say he's a pushover by any means, though.
I want to hear him confess himself. Then, maybe... But if you need us, we'll tear your soul apart.
Let's pick the brain of the creator of the Hellraiser mythos, Clive Barker. Barker set out rather distinctly to make something different when he wrote The Hellbound Heart, the novella that would later be adapted by Hollywood, with himself in the director's seat, into Hellraiser. When this transition occurred, Barker still didn't want his characters to just be another Freddy or Jason. He wanted to make something unique, something that couldn't just be shuffled among the other faces of the slasher genre. In some aspects he succeeded, but ultimately, fate would have other plans. The first Hellraiser film showcases 4 then unnamed Cenobites, who fans in the media later dubbed Pinhead, the female, Chatterer, and Butterball, to better differentiate them. The name Pinhead in particular became synonymous with the character of the lead Cenobite, much to the chagrin of Barker, who always felt the name didn't suit him, and will often go out of his way to detach the name in later works. The 4 Cenobites were envisioned by Barker as a unit, no one particularly standing out among the others. Even their dialogue, allegedly in earlier scripts, was distributed evenly. However, the makeup and prosthetics used on the Chatterer and Butterball Cenobites proved to be too restricting for the 2 actors to even speak. As a result, all their lines were given to the female, and more prominently to Pinhead, altering the dynamic of the Cenobites and the film as a whole, enough so that Pinhead's distinct design would be put on the poster of the first movie. Pinhead became an icon pretty much on accident. As he developed and became more prominent in the social zeitgeist, Pinhead's personality was molded a bit, based in part on the likes of Dracula and Hannibal Lecter according to Barker, who felt an intelligent killer was scarier than a mindless beast, that someone who's 3 steps ahead is a bigger danger. Ironically, this is exactly what made Pinhead easier to reason with than his contemporaries, which kind of affected his status as a villain. It's the whole reason he's more of an anti-hero on the line in the first movie. You could never strike a deal with Michael Myers or Jason to get them to leave you alone. This made Pinhead more human and perhaps less scary in a strictly visceral sense. But I also think it made him a bit more interesting, and it certainly didn't affect his status as an icon. Pinhead was the biggest takeaway in a movie that was only kind of about him. I think this is what pushed Pinhead to be given more screen time in a more active role in Hellraiser 2. The more limelight Pinhead got, the demand for Pinhead rose. It was decided the 4th Hellraiser movie would delve into his past, where we learn he was a British soldier named Elliot Spencer who, after experiencing the horrors of war, desperately lusted for an escape from the harshness of reality, which led him to the Lament configuration. While it wouldn't be my first guess for Pinhead's origin, I think it makes a lot of sense. The only way for Spencer to come to terms with the pain he caused and endured was to learn to enjoy it both ways, becoming the embodiment of sadomasochism. There's a lot of rich irony to the myth and creation of the Cenobites. There's a scene in the 3rd movie in which Pinhead slaughters a club full of people and revives them as Cenobites. We see a view of everyone reduced to deformed bastardizations of their past selves. Their occupations and identities literally melded into their bodies. If Pinhead is going to kill, he wants to make a spectacle of it. He's sure there's a message to send or an example to be made. And while maybe Pinhead wound up slightly more commercial than Baker wanted, I really do think he succeeded in making a horror icon that stood out from the rest. He has a personality really like none of his contemporaries. He isn't desperate and delirious like Leatherface, or mimetically sassy as Freddy, but his dialogue is incredibly memorable for how elegant it comes out. I've never heard someone threaten bloody torture and murder with such grace.
There is a secret song at the center of the world, Joey. And its sound is like razors through flesh.
I don't believe you.
Oh, come. Oh, you can hear its faint echo right now. I'm here to turn up the volume. To press the stinking face of humanity into the dark blood of its own secret heart.
What's also really neat about Pinhead is how collected he is. Not just compared to other slashers, but to other sadomasochist-minded villains. He isn't above expressing the glee he feels from hurting someone. But it feels a little more grand, like a sculptor presenting his masterpiece. As a Cenobite, he's stopped differentiating pain from pleasure, and I think Doug Bradley portrays that really well. Pinhead doesn't officially cross into clear-cut villain territory into the 3rd film in the 9-film legacy of Hellraiser, and fuck all if I'm watching all these. Hellraiser Deader? It also doesn't help that Clive Barker got on the fuck this train after the 2nd movie, allowing Pinhead to just kinda get pulled along for 7 more movies. After the 4th movie, the straight-to-DVD era of Hellraiser movies came about, which consisted entirely of scripts of totally unrelated horror movies, with Pinhead shoehorned in there somewhere. Pinhead wasn't a central villain really until he was handed off to other writers by his own creator. And really, I think that's why what made Pinhead so great is so lost. He was tailor-made to be the slasher villain that was above it all. Someone deadly and unrelenting, but not without reason, and not killing just for the sake of it. So, should Pinhead even be on a show like Most Wanted if he's not entirely villainous in a traditional sense in his purest incarnations? Well, I think something should be absolutely said for his role as a chaotic neutral of sorts. Pinhead is an evil one brings upon themselves. Barker's intended takeaway was that of safe indulgence in pleasures such as sex. Frank sought out the Lament configuration and wound up where he did because he was a hedonist who didn't care what lengths he had to go to get off. That's why Pinhead works as a passive villain. He's only someone that'll make your life hell if you make your life hell. He'll only torture you if you provoke him. Unchecked addiction and indulgence can not only tear apart your life, but the lives of those around you, just as Frank does to his family. You'd need to reach out to him for him to kill you, and that's why he works so well. He's not a serial killer or a demon on a conquest, he's a price to be paid lest you become like him. A cold, emotional beast with no care outside his own fulfillment.